Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the control room of the Deep Space Communications Array, watching the data streams flow across dozens of monitors. For 237 years, this facility had been humanity's voice to the stars. Every day, thousands of messages left Earth. Music from street musicians, poetry from children, scientific discoveries, and simple greetings in hundreds of languages. Elena loved her job. She had spent 15 years making sure every transmission reached as far into space as possible. Today felt different, though. Something was wrong with the readings. "Marcus, come look at this," she called to her assistant. The young man hurried over, adjusting his glasses as he studied the screen. "The power levels are normal," Marcus said, frowning. "Signal strength is good." "What's the problem?" Elena pointed at a small indicator light that should have been green. It was red. The confirmation beacon. "Our messages aren't getting past the solar system boundary." This was impossible. The confirmation beacon was a simple system that told them when their signals successfully left Earth's local space. It had worked perfectly for decades. "Run a full diagnostic," Elena ordered. "Check everything twice." While Marcus worked, Elena walked to the main observation deck. Through the massive windows, she could see the giant radio dishes turning slowly across the desert landscape. Each one was the size of a football field, designed to send humanity's voice as far as possible into the galaxy. The Terran Broadcasting Initiative had started small. In the early days, they only sent basic mathematical sequences and simple music. But as technology improved, the broadcasts became richer. Now they sent entire libraries of human knowledge, art galleries, concerts, and personal messages from families hoping to reach other intelligent life. Elena remembered being a child, recording a message for her school project. She had talked about her pet cat and asked if aliens had pets too. That message was probably still traveling through space, carrying the voice of a 10-year-old girl toward distant stars. "Dr. Vasquez," Marcus's voice was urgent. "You need to see this." She hurried back to the control room. Marcus had brought up a technical display that made Elena's blood run cold. Every outgoing signal was being stopped at exactly the same point, just beyond Pluto's orbit. "That's not possible," she whispered. "There's nothing out there that could block every signal." "It gets worse," Marcus said. He pulled up another screen. "I checked the other stations. Australia, Chile, Antarctica. They're all reporting the same thing. Every outbound transmission is being blocked." Elena felt sick. Humanity had been cut off from the galaxy. After more than 2 centuries of sending messages to the stars, they had been silenced. She grabbed the emergency phone and called Dr. James Wright, director of the Global Communications Council. The phone rang 3 times before his tired voice answered. "Right here." "James, it's Elena. We have a major problem. All outgoing transmissions have been blocked." There was silence on the other end. Then, "What do you mean blocked?" "Something is stopping our signals from leaving the solar system." "Every station is reporting the same thing." That's impossible." "Meet me at headquarters in 2 hours. Don't talk to anyone else about this yet." Elena hung up and stared at the screens. 2 hours felt like forever. She had Marcus continue monitoring while she tried to understand what could cause such a complete blackout. The really strange part was that incoming signals worked fine. They were still receiving data from space probes, background radiation measurements, and the usual cosmic noise. Only outgoing transmissions were affected. At headquarters, Elena found herself in a room full of worried faces. Every major communications director on Earth was there, along with military officials and government representatives. Dr. Wright stood at the front of the room, his usually neat hair disheveled. "As of 800 this morning, every outgoing transmission from Earth has been blocked by an unknown force. Our signals are being stopped at the edge of the solar system." A general Elena didn't recognize raised his hand. Could this be a natural phenomenon? Solar activity or cosmic interference? "No," Wright replied. "This is clearly artificial. The blocking is too precise, too complete. Someone or something is jamming our transmissions." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. For the first time in human history, they weren't alone in the universe. But this wasn't the peaceful first contact that everyone had hoped for. Dr. Sarah Kim from the Australian facility spoke up. "What about the emergency channels? The deep space warning systems?" "Everything," Wright said grimly. "Scientific data, entertainment broadcasts, emergency signals, it's all being stopped." The room erupted in worried conversations. Elena heard fragments of discussions about military responses, diplomatic preparations, and emergency protocols that no one had ever expected to use. Wright raised his hand for silence. There's something else. We've detected an incoming transmission, something powerful coming from the direction of the Galactic Center. Elena's heart pounded. After 2 centuries of sending messages into space, something was finally answering. But given the circumstances, she doubted it would be good news. When will it arrive? Someone asked. Wright checked his watch. Approximately 6 hours. We're setting up a global listening network to receive it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of technical preparations and worried meetings. Elena returned to her facility to help coordinate the reception of humanity's first confirmed message from an alien intelligence. As evening approached, she found herself back in the control room with Marcus and a dozen other technicians. Around the world, every major communications facility was doing the same thing, waiting for a message that might change everything. Signal detected, Marcus announced. It's strong. Really strong? Elena watched the displays as the alien transmission approached Earth. The signal was, unlike anything they had ever seen, incredibly sophisticated and precisely targeted at their planet. It's slowing down, one technician reported. The signal is adjusting to our communication protocols. Elena realized what that meant. Whatever was sending this message understood human technology well enough to make their signal compatible with Earth's receivers. They had been watching humanity for a long time. Beginning reception now, Marcus said. The speakers crackled to life. At first, there was only static. Then, clearly and terrifyingly, a voice spoke in perfect English. Attention, inhabitants of the third planet. You have been broadcasting without permission for 237 of your years. This ends now. Elena's hands shook as she recorded every word. This was it. First contact with an alien intelligence. But instead of the peaceful greeting humanity had dreamed of, they were receiving what sounded like a threat. The voice continued, cold and emotionless. Your communications have been classified as galactic noise pollution. You will cease all transmissions immediately and await further instructions. Failure to comply will result in corrective measures. The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the control room in stunned silence. Elena stared at the speakers, trying to process what had just happened. Humanity's greatest dream had turned into their worst nightmare. They weren't alone in the universe, but their new neighbors didn't want to hear from them. She thought about all the messages that had been sent over the centuries. Children's drawings, love songs, scientific discoveries, hopes and dreams cast into the cosmic void. All of it had been dismissed as noise pollution by creatures who clearly had the power to silence them completely. But as Elena sat in the quiet control room, she felt something growing inside her chest. It wasn't fear, though she was certainly afraid. It wasn't sadness, though her heart was breaking for all the silenced voices of humanity. It was anger. Pure, burning anger at beings who would dare tell humanity to stop reaching for the stars. The second transmission arrived exactly 24 hours later, just as Elena had feared it would. This time she wasn't alone in the control room. Government officials, military leaders, and scientists from around the world had gathered at the facility to hear what their uninvited guests had to say. Incoming signal, Marcus announced, his voice tight with tension. Same source, same power level. Elena nodded to Dr. Wright, who had taken overall command of the situation. Put it through the main speakers. The static cleared, and once again the cold voice filled the room. But this time it spoke in multiple languages: English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, switching between them with perfect pronunciation. Inhabitants of Earth. I am Coordinator Zethmar of the Hegemony of Silence. You have had sufficient time to consider our previous communication. Elena felt her stomach drop. The casual way the aliens switched between human languages showed just how long they had been watching, listening, and learning about Earth. Your species has been under observation for 2,147 of your years. During this time, you have transmitted over 847 million individual communications into our space without authorization. This behavior ends now. The voice paused, and Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. You are not the first young species to make this error. We have dealt with 43 other civilizations that suffered from the same lack of understanding about galactic communication protocols. Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Wright. 43 other species? What had happened to them? To demonstrate the seriousness of our position, we will now show you the consequences of defying the hegemony of silence. The transmission changed. Instead of just audio, video signals began flooding Earth's receivers. Elena watched in horror as images filled the screens around the control room. The first world looked similar to Earth: blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. But as the image zoomed in, Elena could see that something was wrong. The cities were dark. No lights, no movement. No signs of civilization except empty buildings. The species of Kepler 442b sent musical compositions into space for 400 of their years. Coordinator Zethmar explained calmly. They refused to stop when ordered. Their communication networks were permanently disabled. Their society collapsed within 6 months. The image switched to another world. This one was covered in ice, but Elena could make out the remains of massive structures beneath the frozen surface. The inhabitants of Wolf 359c transmitted mathematical theories and philosophical discussions for 600 years. They also refused to comply with our directives. Their planet was placed in permanent communications quarantine. They lasted 2 years before their civilization ended. Elena felt sick. Each image showed another dead world, another silenced species. The hegemony was showing Earth the graveyard of galactic civilization. HD 43007G sent poetry and artistic expressions for over 1,000 years, the voice continued. Their final transmission was a plea for mercy. We have it recorded if you would like to hear it. Without waiting for an answer, the transmission played a haunting sequence of sounds, musical tones that clearly conveyed desperation and fear. Even across the barrier of species and language, Elena realized she was crying. These weren't just abstract alien civilizations. They had been real people, real cultures with their own hopes and dreams and creative expressions, and they had all been murdered for the crime of trying to talk to the universe. The pattern is always the same, Coordinator Zethmar continued. Young species believe they have the right to broadcast their primitive thoughts into space. They fill the galactic communication channels with noise, interference, and cultural pollution. They must be stopped. The transmission switched back to audio only. The hegemony of silence maintains order across 40,000 star systems. We have determined that only mature civilizations possess the wisdom to use galactic communication channels responsibly. Species must prove their worth through conquest, technological advancement, and submission to our authority before they earn the right to speak. Elena clenched her fists. The right to speak? These creatures thought they could control who was allowed to have a voice in the galaxy? Earth, you now face the same choice given to all young species. You will immediately cease all outbound transmissions. You will submit to hegemony authority and accept vassal status. In exchange, your civilization will be allowed to continue existing, though you will remain silent until you prove your maturity. The voice paused again, and Elena could almost feel the weight of its attention focused on their small planet. Or you can choose defiance like the others. The choice is yours, but understand this. We have never failed to silence a disobedient species. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your weapons are toys. Your unity as a species is questionable at best. The transmission was about to end. Elena could sense it. But Coordinator Zethmar had one final demonstration prepared. To show you our capabilities, we will now disable your orbital communication network. Consider this a gentle reminder of what we can do when we choose to act. The signal cut off. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, every satellite in Earth's orbit went dark. Elena watched the monitors in the control room as communication satellites, GPS networks, weather monitoring systems, and space telescopes all stopped transmitting. In minutes, the hegemony had crippled decades of technological advancement, but it wasn't just the satellites. The hegemony had done something else. Every screen in the control room was now displaying the same image. A star map showing the locations of all 43 dead civilizations. Each world was marked with a timestamp showing when it had been silenced. At the bottom of the map, a new entry appeared. Earth, decision pending. Dr. Wright was the first to speak after the transmission ended. They're giving us time to think about our answer. Elena looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some looked terrified. Others appeared angry. A few seemed to be calculating odds and possibilities, but Elena knew what humanity's answer would be. She had seen it in the faces of the technicians who worked tirelessly to send messages to the stars. She had felt it in the voices of children recording greetings for alien friends they might never meet. She had heard it in the music and poetry and scientific discoveries that humans had shared with the universe for over 2 centuries. Humanity wouldn't stay silent. They couldn't. It went against everything that made them human. The question wasn't whether Earth would defy the hegemony of silence. The question was whether they could survive the consequences. Elena walked to the window and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, 43 civilizations lay dead because they had dared to speak. Their voices had been cut short, their cultures destroyed, their dreams crushed. But their silence would not be in vain. Earth had heard their story. Earth knew what the hegemony had done, and Earth would not forget. The emergency session of the United Nations had been going for 18 hours straight. Elena sat in the observer section, watching as representatives from every nation on Earth debated humanity's response to the hegemony's ultimatum. For the first time in living memory, there were no political divisions in the Great Assembly Hall, no arguments between superpowers, no debates about economic systems or territorial disputes. Every human leader was united by a single burning purpose. The hegemony of silence had threatened their species, and that could not stand. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the podium, her voice carrying clearly across the packed chamber. The question before us is not whether we will submit to these aliens. The question is how we will respond to their threats. Elena had been asked to present the technical analysis of the hegemony's capabilities. She had spent 3 days studying every detail of their transmissions, looking for weaknesses. Dr. Vasquez, Santos called. Please share your findings with the assembly. Elena walked to the podium carrying a datapad filled with her team's analysis. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders. What she said next could determine humanity's future. The hegemony's jamming technology is powerful but not perfect, she began. They're using a network of relay stations to block our transmissions. We've identified at least 12 locations where their jamming signals originate. She activated the main display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. Red dots marked the suspected positions of hegemony equipment. The good news is that their technology has limits. They can't jam everything at once. They have to choose what to block. Right now, they're focusing on our long-range communication systems. A hand shot up from the Russian delegation. What about their threat to destroy our satellites? They disabled our satellites temporarily, Elena explained, but they didn't destroy them. This suggests they want to keep the option of returning them to us if we submit. It also tells us something important about their capabilities. She changed the display to show technical readings from the satellite shutdown. The way they disabled our orbital network required precise knowledge of our technology. They've been studying us for a very long time. But studying something and understanding how to defend against it are different things. Elena paused, making sure she had everyone's attention for the most important part. Their jamming network is vulnerable. Each relay station needs to maintain constant contact with the others to coordinate the blocking effect. If we can disrupt enough stations simultaneously, their entire network will collapse. The Chinese representative leaned forward. How many stations would we need to destroy? Based on our analysis, at least 7 of the 12. But there's a problem. The stations appear to be located outside our solar system. Some are as far as 20 light-years away. The assembly erupted in worried conversations. Elena waited for quiet before continuing. This brings us to the real challenge. The hegemony doesn't just control communication jamming technology. They showed us 43 dead worlds. They have the power to destroy entire civilizations. Elena clicked to the next slide showing images from the hegemony's transmission. But I've been thinking about something. Why show us those worlds at all? Why not just destroy Earth immediately if we're such a threat? She had spent sleepless nights considering this question, and she thought she had found the answer. I believe the hegemony prefers to avoid direct military action. Destroying civilizations is expensive and wasteful. It's much easier to frighten species into submission. The dead worlds they showed us might be the exceptions, not the rule. Admiral Sarah Chen stood up from the military section. Elena knew her reputation. She had commanded the Joint Mars Defense Fleet and was considered one of humanity's finest strategic minds. Dr. Vasquez, are you suggesting we call their bluff? I'm suggesting we find out how much force they're actually willing to use, Elena replied. But not by sitting here and hoping for the best. We need to take the fight to them. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The joint military commands have been discussing this possibility. We have the ships and the technology to reach their relay stations. The question is whether we can do it before they retaliate against Earth. Secretary General Santos returned to the podium. Before we discuss military options, I want to address the moral dimension of our choice. The assembly fell silent. Elena could feel the weight of history in the air. The hegemony has given us a simple choice: submit or die. But there's a third option they didn't mention. We can fight. Santos activated a recording system, and Elena realized that this moment would be preserved for all of human history. For over 2 centuries, humanity has been reaching out to the stars. We've shared our music, our art, our science, and our dreams with the universe. We did this because we believed that communication, understanding, and peaceful contact were the highest goals of an intelligent species. The Secretary General's voice grew stronger as she continued. The hegemony has shown us what they do to species who dare to speak. 43 civilizations have been silenced forever. Billions of individuals who will never share their thoughts with the galaxy again. Art that will never be created. Music that will never be heard. Ideas that will never be born. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks as Santos spoke for all of humanity. We will not, allow this to continue. Not just for our own survival, but for every species that might someday look up at the stars and wonder if they're alone. The assembly erupted in applause that lasted for 5 minutes. When quiet finally returned, Santos made the announcement that would change everything. The United Nations hereby authorizes the formation of the Terran Liberation Fleet. Our mission will be to destroy the hegemony's jamming network and restore freedom of communication to the galaxy. Admiral Chen stood again. Madam Secretary General, I volunteer to lead this fleet. Elena found herself standing too. Admiral, I volunteer to serve as Chief Communications Officer. The hegemony has made this personal. Around the assembly hall, other hands began rising. Military officers, scientists, engineers, and diplomats all volunteering for what might be humanity's final mission. But Elena wasn't thinking about failure. She was thinking about the 43 dead worlds and all the voices that had been silenced. She was thinking about the children who would never get to record messages for the stars because the hegemony had decided they didn't deserve to speak. Most of all, she was thinking about something Coordinator Zethmar had said. We have never failed to silence a disobedient species. Elena smiled grimly. The hegemony was about to learn that they had never faced a species quite like humanity before. The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth committed their resources to the Liberation Fleet. For the first time in human history, the entire species was united behind a single cause. The hegemony of silence was about to discover that some voices refused to be silenced, and humanity's voice, when raised in anger, could shake the very foundations of the galaxy. 6 months after the formation of the Terran Liberation Fleet, Elena stood on the bridge of the TLS Defiance, watching the first hegemony relay station grow larger on the main screen. The journey to this point had been longer and more difficult than anyone had expected. The hegemony had not waited quietly for humanity's response. 3 weeks after the UN vote, Coordinator Zethmar had sent another transmission, offering what they called final terms. Submit now, or face the same fate as the 43 dead worlds. Humanity's response had been Admiral Chen's voice broadcast on every frequency. We didn't come here to join your silence. We came to break it. The war that followed had been unlike anything in human history. The hegemony's first move was to attack Earth's outer colonies, Mars, Europa, and the asteroid mining stations. But instead of destroying them outright, the aliens had used precisely targeted strikes to disable communication systems while leaving the colonies mostly intact. Elena realized this was another psychological tactic. The hegemony wanted to show Earth that resistance was hopeless without actually killing millions of humans. They still preferred submission to destruction, but their strategy had backfired completely. Every disabled colony became a rallying point for human anger. Every silenced communication hub was proof that the hegemony's claims about mature civilizations were lies. A truly advanced species wouldn't need to silence others to maintain order. Now 37 ships of the Liberation Fleet were approaching their first target. The relay station hung in space like a metallic spider, its long arms reaching out to catch and block human transmissions. All ships report ready, Commander Torres announced from the tactical station. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the bridge, studying the alien structure. Dr. Vasquez, are you detecting any defensive systems? Elena checked her instruments. Minimal defenses. I'm reading energy shields and what might be point defense weapons, but nothing like what we'd expect from a military installation. Because it's not military, Chen realized. It's a utility station. They never expected anyone to fight back. The first battle was over in 20 minutes. The hegemony station's defenses were designed to stop asteroids and cosmic debris, not determined human warships. The fleet's coordinated attack overwhelmed the shields and disabled the jamming equipment within moments. But as the station went silent, Elena detected something unexpected. Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the station. It's not from the hegemony. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was clearly alien, but not like Coordinator Zethmar's cold tones. This voice was warm, desperate, and filled with hope. Unknown ships, please respond. We are the HFY, imprisoned aboard this station for 17 cycles. Are you here to free us? Elena felt her heart race. Admiral, there are prisoners on that station. Survivors from one of the silenced worlds? Unknown. But they're asking for rescue. Chen made her decision immediately. Launch rescue shuttles, Dr. Vasquez. Try to establish communication with the prisoners. What Elena discovered over the next hour changed everything they thought. They knew about the hegemony of silence. The HFY were not just prisoners, they were slaves. The hegemony didn't simply destroy civilizations that refused to submit. They captured the survivors and forced them to maintain the very systems used to silence other species. We were artists on our homeworld, the HFY leader explained through a translation device. We sent music and poetry to the stars for 400 years. When the hegemony came, we refused to stop. They said they would destroy our world. Elena listened in horror as the alien described what happened next. They didn't destroy it all at once. First, they silenced our communication networks. Then they waited. When our society began to collapse from the isolation, they offered to save some of us in exchange for our service. The HFY's voice became even sadder. We thought we were saving our people. Instead, we became tools of our own oppression. The hegemony uses survivors from silenced worlds to operate their relay stations. Who better to maintain a communication jamming system than those who understand the importance of free expression? Admiral Chen's face was pale with anger. How many other species are being used this way? Most of the 43 worlds. The hegemony keeps a few thousand survivors from each civilization. We maintain their equipment, repair their systems, and serve as living proof of what happens to those who resist. Elena realized the full horror of the hegemony's strategy. They weren't just destroying civilizations. They were turning the survivors into accomplices in the destruction of other species. It was psychological warfare of the cruelest kind. We can free you, Chen promised. All of you. You cannot, the HFY replied sadly. The stations are connected by quantum links. If too many go offline at once, the hegemony will activate the final protocol. What final protocol? They will destroy all the relay stations simultaneously along with everyone aboard them. Thousands of survivors from dozens of worlds will die to protect the remaining network. Elena stared at the star map, showing all 12 relay stations. Each one potentially held survivors from destroyed civilizations. If they attacked too many at once, they would be murdering the very people they were trying to save. But the HFY leader had more information to share. There is something else you must know. The hegemony has been collecting more than just slaves from the destroyed worlds. They have been gathering our cultural transmissions as well. What do you mean? Every song, every poem, every artistic expression that was ever sent into space by the silenced civilizations. The hegemony has collected all of it. They keep it in a central archive, supposedly for study purposes. Elena felt a new kind of anger building inside her. They're hoarding the cultural heritage of 43 civilizations? Yes. Billions of artistic works, scientific discoveries, and philosophical insights that should belong to the entire galaxy. The hegemony claims they're protecting galactic culture from primitive contamination, but they're actually stealing it. Admiral Chen turned to Elena. Doctor, could we access this archive? If we could find it and get close enough, yes. But where would they keep something that important? The HFY answered immediately. The archive is kept at the hegemony's core world, Silthanor. It's the most heavily defended location in their territory. Elena looked at the star charts. Silthanor was over 50 light-years away, protected by the entire hegemony fleet. Getting there would be impossible with their current forces. But Chen was already making plans. We'll need to destroy the relay network carefully, freeing survivors where possible. Then we build our strength for an assault on their core world. Admiral, Elena said quietly, that could take years, and we still don't know how the hegemony will respond when they realize we're not going to surrender. Her question was answered 6 hours later when Coordinator Zethmar's voice filled the bridge once again. Human ships, you have made a grave error. You have attacked hegemony property and stolen our workers. This aggression will not be tolerated. The transmission switched to video showing Zethmar for the first time. Elena was surprised to see that the hegemony coordinator looked almost human. Tall, pale, with large dark eyes that seemed completely devoid of emotion. You have destroyed one relay station. We control 11 others. You have freed 2,847 workers. We hold 186,000 more. Your actions have accomplished nothing except to doom those you claim to protect. Zethmar paused, and Elena could see something that might have been satisfaction in those dark eyes. We have been monitoring your communications during this attack. We know about your plans to build strength for future operations. We know about your desire to reach our core world. We know everything. Elena felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Therefore, we have decided to accelerate our timeline. In 72 hours, the hegemony will begin the final silencing of Earth. Your homeworld will join the 43 others in permanent quiet. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Elena looked at Admiral Chen, seeing her own fear reflected in the Admiral's eyes. They had won their first battle, but in doing so, they had just signed their homeworld's death warrant. The war for galactic freedom had truly begun. The race to save Earth became the most desperate 72 hours in human history. Admiral Chen split the Liberation Fleet into 12 strike groups, each targeting a different relay station simultaneously. It was the only way to prevent the hegemony from destroying the survivor crews before they could be rescued. Elena found herself aboard the lead ship heading for the most dangerous target, the relay station closest to hegemony core territory. Intelligence from the rescued Kethval indicated this station held over 15,000 survivors from 8 different silent civilizations. 30 minutes to target, Commander Torres announced. Elena watched the tactical display as all 12 human strike groups approached their objectives. The plan was risky beyond measure. They had to destroy the entire relay network within a 6-hour window, while rescuing nearly 200,000 enslaved beings from dozens of different species. But the alternative was unthinkable. Long-range sensors had detected massive hegemony ships moving toward Earth. Coordinator Zethmar hadn't been bluffing about the final silencing. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Chen called out, are you ready to attempt communication with the archive? Elena nodded, though her hands were shaking. The rescued Kethval had provided her with access codes that might work on the hegemony's central cultural database. If they could reach it during the confusion of the simultaneous attacks, they might be able to copy the stolen heritage of 43 civilizations. Strike groups report in position, the communications officer announced. Elena held her breath as the reports came in from across space. 12 human fleets, each about to attempt the impossible, fighting a technologically superior enemy while conducting the largest rescue operation in galactic history. This is Admiral Chen to all groups. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth today. We're fighting for every species that ever dared to sing to the stars. Execute Operation Breakout. The battle began on 12 fronts simultaneously. Elena watched through the ship's sensors as human vessels engaged hegemony defenses across multiple star systems. The aliens had clearly not expected such a coordinated assault. Their response was scattered and confused. But Elena's attention was focused on her own mission. As their target station's defenses crumbled under the fleet's assault, she began attempting to access the hegemony's central archive. I'm in, she announced, barely believing it herself. The access codes are working. What Elena saw on her screen took her breath away. The archive contained more cultural data than she had thought possible. Not just from the 43 silenced worlds, but from hundreds of other species that had never been mentioned in the hegemony's threats. Admiral, this is bigger than we thought. The hegemony has been collecting cultural transmissions from across the galaxy for thousands of years. There are species here that went silent centuries ago. Elena began downloading everything she could access. Music that had traveled between stars for millennia. Scientific theories that could advance galactic civilization by centuries. Art that represented the dreams and hopes of countless intelligent species. "Dr. Vasquez," came a voice from the rescued station crew. "You must access the forbidden archives as well." Elena looked up from her console. A tall crystalline being from a species she didn't recognize was standing nearby. "I'm Shard Singer Veltar of the Resonance Collective. My people were silenced 800 years ago. The hegemony keeps our most sacred cultural transmissions in a restricted section of the archive. How do I access it? The coordinates I'm sending you. But be warned, accessing the forbidden archives will trigger security alerts throughout hegemony space. They guard those files more heavily than their military secrets." Elena didn't hesitate. If the hegemony had been hoarding the most important cultural works of destroyed civilizations, then those works needed to be freed. Regardless of the consequences, she entered Veltar's coordinates and immediately felt the ship shudder as new defenses came online around the archive. "Elena, what did you do?" Admiral Chen demanded. "I accessed their most protected files. We're about to learn why the hegemony really doesn't want anyone else to communicate." The data that flooded Elena's console revealed the truth about the hegemony of silence. They weren't an ancient coalition maintaining galactic order. They were a relatively young species that had discovered something terrifying in the cultural transmissions of other civilizations. Every species that achieved interstellar communication eventually began to develop what the files called convergent, transcendencing a philosophical and technological evolution that led to forms of existence beyond physical matter. The hegemony had found evidence that dozens of ancient civilizations had successfully transcended their physical forms through the sharing of ideas and cultural evolution. But the hegemony couldn't transcend. Something in their biology or psychology prevented them from making the evolutionary leap that other species achieved through cultural exchange. Instead of accepting this limitation, they had decided to prevent any other species from transcending as well. "They're not maintaining order," Elena realized with horror. "They're preventing galactic evolution. They're keeping every species trapped at a primitive level because they can't bear to be left behind." The forbidden archives contained the transcendence protocols of hundreds of species, the exact cultural and philosophical exchanges needed to evolve beyond physical existence. The hegemony had been stealing these protocols for millennia, ensuring that no species could follow the path to transcendence. Admiral Chen's voice cut through Elena's shock. "All strike groups report successful station captures. But we have a problem. Hegemony reinforcements are converging on our positions." Elena looked at the tactical display. Massive hegemony fleets were approaching from all directions, and her download of the archives was only 50% complete. "Admiral, I need more time. What I'm finding here could change the entire galaxy." "How much more time?" "At least 2 hours." Elena could see the conflict on Chen's face. 2 hours meant fighting off the entire hegemony fleet with their small liberation force. The odds of survival were essentially zero. But then the communication system crackled to life with voices Elena had never expected to hear. "Human fleet, this is Commander Thekval of the restored Kethval Defense Force. We are moving to support your position. This is Shard Singer Veltar speaking for the Resonance Collective. Our ships are joining the battle." Crystal Web dancers responding. "We stand with the humans." Elena stared at the tactical display as new ships began appearing throughout the battlefield. The rescued survivors hadn't just been freed, they had somehow contacted their scattered people and called them to fight. "How is this possible?" Chen asked. Veltar answered from the bridge. "The hegemony never completely destroyed our civilizations. They silenced our official communications, but some of us survived in hidden colonies, refugee fleets, and underground networks. We've been waiting for someone to break the silence." Elena watched in amazement as the tactical situation completely reversed. The Liberation Fleet was no longer alone. They were leading a galactic rebellion of species that had been hiding in the shadows for centuries. The battle for the archives lasted 18 hours. When it was over, Elena had successfully downloaded not just the stolen cultural heritage of silenced species, but also the transcendence protocols that the hegemony had been hoarding. But the real victory came when Admiral Chen received a transmission from Earth. "Admiral, this is command. The hegemony fleet approaching Earth has suddenly stopped. They're They're broadcasting surrender terms. Elena understood immediately. With their archives captured and their relay network destroyed, the hegemony had lost control over galactic communication. Species across the galaxy were suddenly free to talk to each other again, and they were all sharing the same message. The hegemony's rule was over. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the same control room where she had first detected the jamming of Earth's transmissions. But now, instead of silence, the room was filled with the sound of a free galaxy. Thousands of species were broadcasting simultaneously, sharing music, art, science, and philosophy across the void. The cultural exchange was so rich and complex that Elena's computers couldn't process it all. But the most beautiful sound was coming from the speakers next to her workstation. It was a simple transmission from a child on Earth, asking if there were any alien kids out there who wanted to be friends. And for the first time in galactic history, the answer came back in thousands of different languages. Yes. Elena smiled as she listened to the cosmic symphony of free voices. The hegemony of silence had been broken, not by superior firepower, but by something they had never understood, the unbreakable will of intelligent beings to reach out to each other across the darkness. Humanity had kept its promise. The galaxy would never be silent again. In the months that followed, Elena established the Galactic Communication Sanctuary, ensuring that no species would ever again be denied the right to speak to the stars. The Transcendence protocols were shared freely with any civilization ready to take the next step in their evolution. And sometimes, late at night in her laboratory, Elena would play recordings of the voices that had been silenced for so long, the songs and stories and scientific discoveries of 43 dead worlds.